Hello.
Tyler?
Hey, how's it going?
Going all right?
Oh, it looks like it's just us two. Wow, all right. Light day. I have no idea how popular this meeting is going to be today, given the time frame.
Yeah.
But I am glad you're here because you're on the agenda. I wanted to talk about you. But other than that, I don't have too much to talk about.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I guess while we wait for people to come in, I can obviously just ask you, like, if you're interested. I was looking at your commit history and all that stuff to the repo. Like, you're well above, I think, the minimum to become an approver. And I know we had talked about it. I just assumed that like you needed some time or something like that. But I think you were ready when we initially talked. But if you're interested, I'd like to, propose you and then see if we can get Anthony to sign off on it as well, which I don't think you have a problem with.
Cool. Yep, that sounds good to me.
Okay. I really value the work that you do. I appreciate all the reviews and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, super excited to
Cool. Thanks.
bring you on. Yeah, definitely. I was noticing also, like, we can just kind of maybe jump in a little bit on the versioning doc. You had said that, like, okay, so like your response was that like it is something of more of a global issue. I think was the takeaway from specifying what a stable instrumentation actually can or can't entail, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm kind of wondering, like, what do you think we should do in our versioning doc? Should we just try to not include that, or I mean, I guess we could just wait merging this until the other one merges.
Yeah, I think, did it just merge?
Oh, let's see.
Too much
I have
email.
it open.
Yeah, it looks like that's all merged.
Okay.
So I think it's totally reasonable for us to model our language around what the OTEP says. So yeah, it's not necessarily like it's not going to be perfect, but we can update it if they need to make updates. Yeah, I think we should stick with what the OTEP goes with.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Like you said, like we can always update. Yeah, and like this is just like a first approach as well. Like we still need to actually get this ratified and put into the specification. I think Ted was trying to do that this week, so
okay.
Maybe it'll get ironed out there as well.
Do you know if GitHub changed something? I used to be able to, or maybe it's on other repos, I used to be able to resolve my own comments, but I can't do that anymore.
It's on repos that you have some access to.
Okay.
I don't know. That one's a tough one. Because I wasn't able to do that for the longest time, the specification one, and then I became a metrics approver, and then it wasn't a problem.
Okay.
But
yeah.
I don't know if we do that by default. I think it's by like repository, it might be settings or something like that.
Yeah.
Which means it's probably the open telemetry community that changed something. Is probably my guess. But yeah. Wow, cool. This could be like one of the shortest meetings possible. Resolving things. Yeah, speaking of that, I'm guessing, are you out of town next week as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, I'm out of town starting as soon as this meeting ends.
So you're even more motivated to get this thing over with. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, we got a Josh.
Who's Josh?
Hi.
Josh.
I have briefly have a child with me, but she is only going to be here a few minutes.
Does she write any good Go code?
You write Go code? No.
Well, hopefully she can just be a good cheerleader. We need a few of those as well. Yeah, there wasn't too much to actually talk about. It's just been David and me hanging out. I was asking David if he wanted to become an approver, and he begrudgingly accepted. So pretty excited about that. Yeah, I'm going to put a PR in afterwards, and hopefully we'll get it ratified with Anthony going on here. I was hoping he would show up, but I'll just ping him async. We resolved a few things in the versioning doc, or one thing in the versioning doc, and then the only other thing that I wanted to like kind of address was the Circle CI stuff. It looks like the GitHub Actions is working perfectly fine, so it might be time just to kind of like remove the Circle CI stuff, but super minor minutia things to address. I didn't know if you guys have specific PRs you wanted to go into. I am, as always, like woefully behind on reviewing PRs. New Relic has been asking me to do a lot of internal things for the past week, so I'm trying in my spare time to make sure some reviews get done, but it's slow going. So yeah, if we wanted to go over something specifically here, we have plenty of time to kind of talk through it if you guys had any questions or wanted to just review things.
I don't have anything. I'm still working on the metric exporter bridge.
Oh, cool.
I have to say, I would love to spend some time writing something for the metrics hour next hour, but and maybe if we don't need to meet, we don't need to meet. Although this also is an opportunity for the three of us to have a small group discussion, if anything about metrics was worth discussing. I don't really want to talk about that combined push-pull controller thing. But I have this topic on my mind that's like right now about that I think, David, you have a useful position on about mixing label dimensions and whether version and compatibility requirements cover which metric dimensions we are using. And this topic expands into so many directions that it's like causing exhaustion for me at this point. And I've been having a number of debates with my own like data platform team here who are ex-Monarch people. And so it's like, I'm having an interesting time of it. I'd love to hear if any thoughts of yours about what happens when we mix label dimensions.
Sorry, what do you mean by mixed label dimensions?
I think I feel like it was something you said in the past, so I'm using the wrong terminology at the moment, but I'm talking about how in our semantic convention documents, we might say that we have a host CPU time or host heap memory, host memory with state labels. So you have a state label for in use for your memory, but what if somebody came up with another label they wanted to put on their memory? If the semantic convention says it's got one dimension, it's only got one dimension. But that, so I think, I'm not sure what OpenCensus truly believed in this regard. I know that there was statements about making views that could configure metrics, but I'm not sure anyone ever talked in OpenCensus times about potentially supporting instrumentation packages that could vary the number of label dimensions that they use. And I know it's kind of a clash of the worlds here because Prometheus was very restrictive on terms of what label dimensions you might use, and StatsD was never, so that you might find yourself just adding labels to a counter. Because it's expressed as a delta, it's almost like there's like no problem adding more labels on deltas. But as soon as you talk about cumulatives, adding labels means something in a way that I've only recently started to appreciate. And so I don't know whether we should resolve this by declaring that you may never change your label dimensions, or whether we should solve this by an algorithm, essentially. And I think we kind of do have an algorithm, but it's been poorly stated, or it needs to be written up, which is what I was going to do with the next 50 minutes if we have nothing else to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I forget who it was, but someone brought up the point that with processors, you can always get rid of labels. And that seems like a pretty viable solution. So if we know that some metric is really widely used and we want to make a change that adds a label, we can always put out sort of a bridge and just leave it in its own package and say, yeah, here's the bridge. You want the old behavior, there you go.
Yeah, and that bridge I'm thinking of is That's a great way of thinking of it. I've also been thinking about how to do it in the collector. And I
Mhm.
realize now that there's a difference, like implementing this in the SDK is sort of a special case where it's much easier, but implementing it in the collector actually requires us to get a little bit, like we haven't specified really what the semantics of these cumulative points when the timestamps overlap, and there's certain problems that might ensue. So if you delete, I mean, we've introduced this notion of a resource in OTLP that Prometheus doesn't quite have. So if I want to export some metric into Prometheus and I literally ignore all my resource labels, but I have a start time, and like now I have a collector that's aggregating all those together by dropping like whatever resource labels there were. I'm going to end up with these time points that overlap by their time, by their start time and their current time. And that I think is kind of meaningless. Like you've kind of destroyed the data. Where what semantically, I think what would be intended would be that you have these points that get summed together. Either they overlap or they get windowed, they get aligned and then summed together to produce a new time series is the sum.
Yeah, actually.
And I think we can do that. We can write a collector stage to do that. And that's kind of what I'm excited about doing right now. But it's really, this is me trying to double down on the OTel design of having these, so actually I haven't said the other half of my argument here, but this is some observer types that we've created, which maps into a cumulative even in a Prometheus model, or the up-down sum observer that we have that maps into this new thing we have, which is NMCS, non-monotonic cumulative sum. These are, I feel that the semantics we've prescribed in OTel is that if you want to add labels on those instruments, now there's a problem, because you might have one process outputting one dimension and another process outputting two dimensions. And the intention was that the sum is preserved. So if you have one person could have a state label with one dimension, they're going to have like, higher averages, whereas the other person has, more time series that add up to the same sum, but have more label dimensions. So you could have like in-use memory and the variety, like if it's storage, you've got SSD and you've got disk, right? So to me, I think the correct transformation, if you want to output a cumulative, is to do this correct summation and create a new timestamp and essentially output a new series. And it requires that we do alignment and summation and so on, but it's special for those sum observer and up-down sum observers. Whereas with the sort of value observer instrument, what I've also been calling true gauge, when I talk to the sort of Prometheus and the Monarch team people, those you would not sum in order to erase labels. Those are easier to erase labels from, much like delta points are. You just erase a label, there's no difference from a delta perspective. Anyway, so I'm starting to think about a design for a cumulative transducer or something like that that can erase labels correctly. But maybe we've gone too far, and I sometimes I need Bogdan to help back me up, because like open census is whatever we say it was. It's like people who are at this point, we're pointing backwards and saying open census was the blueprint that we followed, and here we are. What should we do? And we have these conflicts and we don't really know how to answer them.
Yeah.
I appreciate your listening to me. I was going to try to write an issue about this.
I didn't actually work on open census at all. I was like, I worked with, or Bogdan helped me in my quest to try and help Kubernetes use open census,
right?
Which is now morphed.
Yeah, I picked up from one of the recent meetings that you had worked in the Kubernetes stuff, and that told me that you had a Prometheus sort of background thinking about metrics as well. And I really do care that we have a story, and I said it in the Tuesday meeting about, like, we can talk again about open metrics compatibility, and I think if we're going to allow ourselves to design a protocol that supports things that can't be done in a Prometheus model or an open metrics world, we have to both define a valid translation into OTLP, but also to define a valid translation out of OTLP. And to me, that means that we have to have this like correct way to erase labels if we're going to really support OTel and OTel's design. And that's not so hard, but it does mean that, like, you might have a configuration in the collector somewhere that says, as we are now about to export to open metrics, we are going to erase all but the following dimensions from these groups of metric instruments. So that would be essentially the view. You need a view before you can output to open metrics in a world where you have these mixed labels on cumulatives.
Does Prometheus not, or you may know this detail. I linked an issue in the chat just because it sounded related, but if you scrape multiple things that have the same set of labels with the Prometheus receiver and then try and send it to a Prometheus exporter, you only get one of the targets.
Right. This is the problem. Yeah, this is the problem I mentioned earlier with cumulatives colliding that overlap.
Yes. Okay.
To do a correct export, we need this imaginary pipeline stage that I've got an algorithm written down. I want to put it into a public issue, essentially to solve this problem.
Okay.
Cool.
Cool.
I'm glad to see this. Thank you. This is useful. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you both for listening to me.
I'm a pretty good rubber duck.
With that, unless anyone else wants to talk about stuff, I just learned something wonderful and also feel like I know you better, David. And I'm glad to hear that you will become an approver. So thank you.
Yep, and I'm happy to collaborate on the collector side stuff. I'd
Great.
like to become more involved in the collector, but it's yeah,
ping
it feels
you on
like
this
there's so
issue
much
that I file.
stuff going on that the maintainers are stretched right now.
No, it's the way across OTel. Honestly, every time I finally get myself a work block to just choose what I'm going to do, as opposed to being reactive to stuff that Lightstep's interrupting me with. Or like last week, I chose to catch up on Go reviews, but I'm really behind on other stuff. And
yeah,
you just have to choose, and then everything else falls behind. So we're all trying. And thank you,
So if I
Tyler,
could
for
give you some advice there, David. Don't become a maintainer. Stick at that approval level.
yeah,
it's a good level.
right.
But
Thanks,
yeah,
Tyler.
it's
And
totally
thank you again for all your work.
appreciated. Yeah.
of course.
But yeah, Josh, I don't think I have anything else. So yeah, we can see y'all later.
See you soon. Thanks.
Have a good vacation, David.
Yep. See you next year.
All right. Yeah, bye.
Bye.